They assumed he was an easy mark, a solitary figure in a roadside cafe. But when they crossed the line, they discovered too late that some fights are lost before they even begin. The late afternoon air was sharp and cold as Jonah pulled his dusty sedan into the gravel lot of May's Cafe, a time-worn eatery tucked alongside an old highway. The building looked as though it had been forgotten by the world. Faded paint, a crooked sign, and a faint hum from a flickering neon light that declared it open. A derelict gas station stood nearby, its pumps long abandoned to rust and weeds. Jonah killed the engine, pausing to take in his surroundings. The diner was quiet, its windows glowing faintly against the fading daylight. He grabbed his worn jacket and stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots the only sound. Inside, the cafe was exactly what he'd expected. Cracked vinyl booths, checkered tiles scuffed from decades of footsteps, and a jukebox in a corner that seemed more decoration than functional. A weary-looking waitress was behind the counter, wiping it down as if by reflex. She glanced up when Jonah entered, her tired eyes briefly meeting his before flicking away. The place was sparsely occupied, a lone trucker nursing a mug of coffee, an older couple sharing pie, and at the far end, a group of leather-clad bikers lounging in a booth like they owned the place. Their conversation died the moment Jonah stepped through the door. He chose a booth by the window, the kind that let him see everything and everyone. Years of ingrained caution shaped habits like these. As he sat, the waitress approached, her notepad ready, but her attention split between him and the bikers. "Coffee?" she asked, her tone neutral, but her gaze nervous. "And a burger with fries," Jonah replied evenly. He handed her the menu with a polite nod, and she left quickly, her pace brisk as though eager to avoid lingering near him too long. Behind him, the low rumble of voices from the bikers picked up again. Jonah didn't need to look to know he was the topic of their amusement. He caught fragments, laughter, mocking tones, someone calling him lonesome cowboy. He ignored it, keeping his focus on the steam rising from his freshly delivered coffee. One of the bikers, a burly man with a thick beard and tattoos crawling up his neck, raised his voice. "Hey, stranger, you lost or just too dumb to know where you don't belong?" The comment hung in the air, loud enough to turn heads. Jonah didn't respond. He stirred his coffee calmly, his expression unreadable. "Guess he's too scared to talk," another biker chimed in, his wiry frame leaning forward as he laughed. "Maybe he needs an invitation." The waitress darted nervous glances their way as she refilled Jonah's water. He gave her a small nod, silently telling her it was fine. She lingered for a second longer, then hurried off to the safety of the counter. Beardman stood, his chair scraping harshly against the tile. He sauntered over to Jonah's booth, his boots heavy against the floor. The others watched, grinning in anticipation. The cafe grew quieter with each step he took, the tension palpable. "Hey, friend," Beardman drawled, leaning a hand on Jonah's table. His leather vest creaked as he shifted his weight. "You got a death wish, sitting here like that? Or are you just stupid?" Jonah slowly looked up, his expression calm but firm. "Just eating," he said simply, his tone measured. Beardman grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "Not for long, you're not. This here's our turf, and we don't take kindly to strangers thinking they can just stroll in, and—" "I'm not here for trouble," Jonah interrupted, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the biker's bluster. "Just a meal?" Beardman's grin faltered. He straightened, his bravado waning slightly under Jonah's steady gaze. But the man's pride wouldn't let him back down. "Wrong answer," he sneered, slamming his palm on the table. "You're gonna learn some respect." Before Beardman could move again, Jonah's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with a vice-like strength that stopped him cold. The biker froze, startled by the sudden display of power. Jonah's voice dropped, low and unyielding. "Walk away." Beardman's face twisted in a mix of anger and confusion. He yanked his arm free, retreating a step before turning to the others. "Get over here," he barked, his voice filled with forced bravado. The remaining bikers rose from their booth, their movements deliberate and threatening. They fanned out, forming a loose circle around Jonah's table. The air in the diner grew thick with anticipation. The trucker glanced up from his coffee, eyes wide, while the waitress reached for the phone, her fingers trembling. "Don't do this," she whispered, her plea directed at no one in particular. Jonah stood slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. He adjusted his jacket and turned to face the advancing bikers. His stance was relaxed, his expression unchanged. The calm in his demeanor was unnerving, a sharp contrast to the hostility in the room. "Last chance," Jonah said evenly, his gaze sweeping over the group. The bikers laughed, though the sound was forced. Beardman stepped closer, fists clenched. "You think you're tough? Let's see how tough." The moment he lunged, Jonah moved with speed and precision. The fight was over almost as soon as it began. In a blur of motion, he disarmed, disoriented, and dismantled each of the bikers with calculated efficiency. Chairs tipped, plates shattered, and the cafe erupted into chaos. Yet through it all, Jonah remained calm, his actions controlled and deliberate. When it was over, the bikers lay groaning on the floor, their confidence shattered. Jonah dusted off his jacket, dropped some bills on the counter, and nodded at the stunned waitress. "Thanks for the coffee," he said, his tone as steady as ever. As he stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the door jingled faintly behind him. The cafe returned to silence, save for the low moans of the defeated bikers. Some lessons, Jonah thought, didn't require words. The air outside was cool, carrying the faint scent of desert sage and the sound of distant highway traffic. Jonah stood still for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. The neon sign of May's Cafe flickered weakly behind him, a stark contrast to the storm of chaos that had unfolded inside. He adjusted his jacket and glanced at his reflection in the truck's window. Calm, composed, as if the past 10 minutes were just another quiet moment in an ordinary day. Inside, the aftermath was telling. Chairs lay scattered, overturned. The bikers groaned as they attempted to pick themselves up, their bravado now replaced with sheepish pain. The waitress stood frozen behind the counter, phone in hand but forgotten, her eyes wide with equal parts fear and awe. The lone trucker in the corner slowly raised his coffee cup in an unspoken toast to Jonah's quiet defiance. For Jonah, it was just another moment in a long line of moments, reminders that some people test boundaries they don't understand until it's too late. He wasn't proud of what happened, but neither was he ashamed. Survival wasn't about bravado. It was about knowing when to stand firm and when to walk away. The door jingled again as Jonah pulled it open to climb into his truck. The sound startled the waitress, snapping her back to reality. She hurried to the doorway, hesitant yet compelled to speak. "Hey," she called out softly. Jonah paused, his hand on the door handle. "You didn't have to." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Thank you." Jonah tipped his head in acknowledgement, but said nothing. Words weren't necessary. He'd done what needed to be done. Nothing more, nothing less. As he slid into the driver's seat, the sky above burned with hues of orange and purple, the sun sinking below the horizon. He turned the key, and the truck's engine rumbled to life. With one last glance at the cafe, at the battered bikers still nursing their bruised egos, and the waitress who now stood a little taller, he eased onto the road, the gravel crunching beneath his tires. The road stretched ahead, endless and open. For Jonah, it wasn't about the destination. It never had been. It was about the journey and the quiet resolve that carried him through it. As the truck merged onto the highway, its taillights fading into the deepening twilight, Jonah felt the familiar pull of the open road, a path as unpredictable as the life he led. Somewhere ahead, another town, another diner, and perhaps another test awaited. But for now, there was only the steady hum of the engine and the promise of solitude.